Michael Fitzmaurice.
Margaret Nascan Corla, and I welcome the opportunity in speaking on this legislation, which is a fairly detailed document. I suppose the first thing that when you look back on, and I suppose it's easy to look back, but when David Cameron probably went over to the EU trying to negotiate a few things, in hindsight, if agreement could have been reached at that stage, we wouldn't have gone through what we have gone through over the last number of years. But unfortunately, the foresight wasn't there to see it, and I do fear and I do think that in the upcoming European elections, when you look at different European countries, that Europe is in for a bit of a backlash in certain countries especially, that will cause problems down the road. There's no point in we trying to duck from it. In the legislation, one thing I would say, Lescan Corla, that I do think coming near the end of this legislation, and I know that you have to try and get it through as quick as you can, and I don't think there'll be many people that will be objecting or blocking it. I think people will be constructive. I know that amendments will be put in, but I think it will be done in a constructive way. But I do think that we should have sort of like a questions and answers session, because everyone, including myself here, will stand up and we'll do our 15 or 20 minutes and then away after that. And I think that it would be important if we had a detailed debate of questions and answers coming near the end. We'll look at that a bit for the committee later on. Minister, as well in agriculture, it is encouraging to see or to hear in the last number of days, Michael Gove, he stated that there wouldn't be tariffs put on Irish beef, which, if there was a hard Brexit, which is a good thing to hear, and it's it gives a bit of hope, especially to the beef sector that is in turmoil at the moment. And I think that we need to, this is about, and the whole document indeed, we need to be careful in Ireland that we, this isn't about one up on someone or winners and losers. This is about trying to make sure that our country's interests are protected, but that you don't kick someone when they're down, because sometimes they can come back at you. And I think in agriculture, the live export minister, and we had a debate a week ago in committee where some of the live exporters were in, and they believe that we could be pushing more live exports with delegations going out like we do for the cattle that are slaughtered. And I think that's one thing that we need to do with the way the beef sector is at the moment, because as everyone is aware, people that are rearing cattle to slaughter at the moment, they are losing their shirt on them, and that won't continue happening. I think that if there was, in the event of the likes of a hard Brexit, we need to make sure that there is avenues as well in the line of intervention or aids to storage at a proper price. No good bidding someone worse than what they're getting at the moment. And I do think that it's a time where careful language is required in the line of when you talk to farmers out there at the moment, with some of the media sections that have reported, they have, some of the headlines have been basically ferociously alarming to farmers. And you see the knock-on effect, because anyone that lives in rural parts of Ireland sees the effect that is having, because when you talk to people at machinery business or whatever, there's a fear there to invest. And I think we've got to try and bring confidence back into the whole area again. And it's ferociously important that the language that comes out is measured and not sort of extreme, sort of saying that it's the end of the end of the for the likes of the beef and all that. On top of that, in the line of transport, there are a lot of things that we need to watch. We have hauliers that has to have the national and international haulage licences. that we have to make sure, and I note in the legislation that there is a section on that. Also, licences. There's a lot of talk about licences at the moment. I think it is ferociously important that Ireland, as we did before we were ever in the EU, we recognised a licence from England that someone could drive here without having to be getting all the different colour cards in the world or whatever. I know that's talked about in insurance, but in the line of licences, I couldn't see it in the document. Maybe I missed it, but or maybe it's coming in the Minister for Transport's document. But I think we need to recognise the licences for driving, be it cars and lorries and all the different types of gear. The one big thing, and in the event if it was, and hopefully it won't be a hard Brexit, there is talk that Rosslare port will be, basically upped, because there'll be obviously more ships in and out. But it is regrettable that our Taoiseach at the moment, in 2012, the west of Ireland, the Midlands and the Northwest, from where the Lascan Corla is from, was taken out of that TEN-T funding. And the minister that's here at the moment, Minister Halligan, was within at the table when we got a commitment from the government that they were going to, in the first 3 months, I remember being beside you, in the first 3 months that we would get the TEN-T back again. And that's not about my back door. That's Cork Mallow. That's Donegal. That's the A5. That's Rosslare Port. That's Killybegs Port. It's Donegal, or it's Galway Port. It is Knock Airport. And those are the areas that are really affected. And they were making sure that the likes of Waterford would get the status to basically be a core network. And what happened at the time was that we had Fines Port was brought up, and that's good for Fines, and no one begrudges it, but it went straight from Fines to Dublin, Cork to Dublin, and to hell with the rest of the country. And I think for people in the southeast, people in the Midlands, the West and the Northwest, that were left out of that. I know there's an amendment in Europe at the moment to get Rosslare, and I think it's Waterford Port off the top of my head, up to that status. I think that we need to make sure that that's concentrated on. We got a committee in the last few weeks. We were told that they'd make a new application, but in my honest opinion, that will isn't there in the department, because if you're not living in Dublin, you don't seem to be living anywhere in this country. And I think that that has to be focused on, because we have got to remember the people. A lot of companies in a hard Brexit scenario would come to the likes of Dublin, but the rural areas are the areas, the Monaghan's, the Cavans, the Donegals, right down along the western corridor, because we're reliant on agriculture, and that's the reality of it. I know there is also, we have to make sure that our air travel is not disrupted, and our sea travel, which will actually become probably more important if there was such a thing as a hard Brexit. We have got to make sure that that is all covered, and in the line of our fish. And I'm no expert on fish, I want to be very clear on that, but we have got to make sure that the Irish fishermen are basically allowed fish where they were able to try and make a living out of it. It's hard enough to make a living out of it. But, and also in the line of agriculture, hard Brexit or soft Brexit or any Brexit, for the last 2 or 3 years, in the price of an animal, the same animal in England, because of red tractors, able to make €200 more, and for whatever reason, we're not able to get our cattle into it at that same price, and which is, I just cannot understand it. In the line of Irish companies, we have to make sure, and I saw in the legislation, we talked about companies, and we talked about Enterprise Ireland helping them, and we talked about the IDA, and I think that is good. In the line of your own department, Minister, in the construction, and especially from the west of Ireland, we have a ferocious amount of youngsters, unfortunately, because when the country hit a bang in 2008 and 9, we lost probably the goods of 250,000 youngsters, and a lot of them came from the western shoreline, from Donegal right down to Kerry. they also came from other areas, but that's where a large majority of them were from. And there's tickets like CSCS and for all the different construction, like diggers and dumpers and all that. And it's recognised in Northern Ireland, and it's recognised here, and it's recognised in England. And I hope, and I presume you have that's done, that those tickets are recognised in both places for those youngsters that would be there, and the line of the safe pass, to make sure that if someone got a job that they came from England, that they wouldn't be having to go through all the same rigmarole. And I do think that the CSCS tickets, you can go to the north and get the digger or dumper or whatever ticket done, and I think it's ferociously important that we cover ourselves in legislation on that. And I know that there's no point in the omnibus bill, you'll be going through it there and looking at different regs and different statutes, SIs and whatever, and I know that you'll be over and back, but make sure, and this is why I'm saying we need questions and answers. You know, like, this isn't about catching somebody out, this is about making sure that we haven't forgot some section of our communities around the country, and especially for the likes of our youngsters and the licences. Like every weekend driving a car, so many youngsters come to Knock Airport for the weekend to come home because they might be working in London or Manchester or whatever, and want to make sure that we recognise an English licence that way. In the line of the health, the cross-border, to make sure that we have the same, and I think from my understanding that that's sort of resolved, and that's a good thing, that in the line of people getting procedures done, that the same cross-border initiatives can be worked, and that the likes of the different schemes to help people that have been on long waiting lists, or that interaction continues, and our joint up thinking in some of our hospitals, the likes of Auchnagelvin and all of that. I think that's ferociously important that we keep that going, because this isn't about, you know, putting a blockage if things did go wrong. I think we were before before be it Ireland or before the UK joined the EU, we had agreements there that date back years and years and years before that, and I think that we have to be able to kick them into action to make sure that there's smoothness between the two countries, because whether we like it or whether we don't, we might have been fighting with them for years, there's a lot intertwined in the line of look at imports and exports, people, all the different types of things in business that go on, and the other side of it is, and I think it's one that has been forgot, the likes of the mushroom industry. The mushroom industry would have gone through a lot of fluctuations in Ireland down through the years, but I think it's 85% of our mushroom industry goes to the UK, and I think that it's ferociously important that we make sure that that industry, and I'm sure Minister Creed will be watching that under the agriculture, because it's a very volatile business. It depends on demand, but it also depends on the rate of sterling, and that is, you know, ferociously important for the jobs that's in that sector, to make sure that they're protected. In the line of the border and the Good Friday Agreement and all of that, we've got to, you know, look at, there's some things out of our hands that is not in our destiny here. And the one part I just worry about, and it'd be nice to get clarification on it while we're in here, and hopefully we won't need this legislation. I think everyone in here hopes that we'll spend the next few weeks, but that be it in vain, or that it will be not needed at the end of the day, that a solution will be found, and I think that's the wish for most people. But we need to make sure that the likes of the Good Friday Agreement, and that the people in Northern Ireland especially don't feel left out of this whole process. In the line of pensions and social welfare, I think that I understand that the departments met up with the Northern Ireland and the UK, and that pensions are going to be, say, the English pensions that come here, or vice versa. My understanding is that there's an agreement in place there, and that's welcome. Now, there is some speculation that you'd have to have a bank account in England and then get it across. And I think that this clarification for the people out there is required to know about this, because there's, especially among, say, our elderly, obviously they'll be getting pensions, there is a lot of worry. They are wondering what will happen, or will, say, can the UK, in the event of a hard Brexit or whatever, can they, not fulfil what they said they would do, and there is a worry out there. I think that it can be resolved, and in fairness, I think, going by listening to what we have heard and reading that legislation, that there's going to be agreements there that will copper fasten the situation that we have at the moment, and that is welcome. But we need to come out clear to the people and nearly list out all different things to make sure that they aren't in fear of what will happen. As I've said, we need to make sure that, and look at the game is, or what's going on is never over until solutions are found. There is talk at the moment that it may be extended or whatever. I think that hopefully common sense and people will sit down together and get a resolution to this. It's difficult for Ireland, really, in certain situations, because when you have two others playing something out on a field, and you're nearly like the hurler on the ditch watching, and you don't know what way it'll go, there is a lot of people anxious, and a lot of people have built up businesses throughout the year, and they're afraid that their livelihoods will actually be lost, and none more so, in my opinion, than the agricultural sector. Like, you even see things that you wouldn't, that some people mightn't even think of, the likes of cheese and stuff like that. That there is a huge worry that that it would be ended up that to be a way dearer, and that other imports. But I am a believer, and I welcome, as I said, what was announced the other day, that there wouldn't be putting on tariffs on agricultural products from Ireland. And I'm a believer that if you look at the English housewife over the last number of years, they have bought into the red tractor, which is probably the premium price beef in England. And I cannot see, and I saw some media reports over the last week, how England or the UK could be flooded with British beef. I don't believe that, bear a financial catastrophe for them, that the British housewife is going to go from going for red tractor, a premium product, to going for beef that would have been fairly questionable, with the evidence that Ireland gathered over a number of years from the likes of Brazil and other countries like that, that don't adhere to the same type of regulation that, be it Ireland does, or the other European countries, or indeed, in fairness to England, that they've done themselves. And I believe that, providing that there isn't, and we have to take them for their word, that there wouldn't be tariffs put on, I think that's welcome, and it is important for the likes of the Irish beef industry, because we all know that it's under ferocious pressure at the moment, on its knees, needs ferocious help. And when you look at the area that's badly affected, be it from Donegal down along Monaghan, Cavan, over the west of Ireland, and that, you come from an area where there's a lot of suckler cows that are basically the breeders of the good beef, I would call it, in this country. And we have got to make sure that they are protected. But I do think one thing, and I would ask the Minister for Transport to address this, that the likes of the 10T funding, and they've ducked and dived now for the last 2 years in it, that Department of Transport, that we are put into a situation that, as well as Rosslare and Waterford, which needs to be done, but that the west, northwest and the Midland areas, and especially the areas along the border, that all is included in that core network. It is up to our department to do that. We see the EU at the moment, they have said that they are willing to sort of ease off on state aid rules and different things. Well, when you get someone in a sort of a happy humour like that, now is the time to dig it in, and now is the time to get the things done that we require in this country.